Welcome to the Point. We're doing evolution still, and we'll be doing for quite a lot longer still, because this is such an important subject. Welcome to the Point. As I say, we are doing evolution, and remember that they're teaching our young people and our children at schools and universities that evolution is a fact, although it's always called the theory of evolution. And to carry on from last program, we were talking about how Charles Darwin introduced his theory of gene mutation. Let's look at his book now, 188, Origin of Species. And he said that basically, for example, man arose by chance from the apes and the chimpanzees, which is not what the Bible says. In Luke chapter 3, the end of Luke chapter 3, it says that Adam was the son of God, not the son of a monkey. However, in his book, The Origin of Species, Charles Darwin says that out in the wild, different animals compete with each other, and there's something goes on called natural selection, and that the fittest and most well-adapted types of beings, animals and birds and fish survive, and that he said that the different types of animals and birds and fishes, they arise because of gene mutation. So this program we're going to be talking about gene mutation, which is a very, very important principle. It's probably the most important principle behind the whole theory of evolution. Personally, I think it's absolute rubbish. Very strong words, but I think it is absolute rubbish based on 27 years as a medical doctor. If you're enjoying these programs, we'd love to hear from you at info@revelationtv.com. So do write to us at info@revelationtv.com. I do have a website called freechristianteaching.org. It's going to be updated soon, and all of this material will be available free on the website, so you'll be able to download it from YouTube. So let's move on to this idea of gene mutation. Now, I object very strongly to this idea that DNA, the genetic code in all of our 100 trillion cells, can mutate into other types of DNA, which produce a better adapted, perhaps more intelligent species than the species. For example, if I've got gene mutation going on in my body, if I were to have children and there was gene mutation, it is proposed by Charles Darwin that my children, because of gene mutation, might be better looking, more intelligent, taller, slimmer, with better social skills than all the rest of us. And perhaps better at using computers and all the rest of all the wonderful things you can imagine. Well, all I can tell you is it's absolute rubbish. I can't be more strong about that than I am. It is absolute rubbish that gene mutation changes our DNA into something better. Because, as I say, as an experience of a medical doctor, gene mutation causes illness and death. Let's look at the next slide, which is 189. That is, you have 100 trillion cells, and each of your cells, you've got what's called a human karyotype. Those are your different genes, 23 from mum and 23 from dad, and they make up the whole human karyotype, all made up of your different DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid, which is the most powerful genetic code in the universe. Right, let's move on now. The human genome, that word genome, is basically a complete set of genetic information for humans. So all of the information about you and about me, the color of my eyes, the color of your eyes, the color of my hair, the color of your hair, everything about you, every single feature concerning your anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry, and a lot else beside, is encoded in your DNA, which is totally supernatural. We're talking later how scientists, lots and lots of scientists, have said that DNA, there's no chance whatever that DNA could have evolved by chance. Right, let's look now at image 190, which is a picture of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, this famous double helix, this famous molecule which encodes all of the information for our 100 trillion cells. And these actual, the DNA molecules are found within the mitochondria. That's the very central, very high energy part of each of our 100 trillion cells. And the coding within the DNA is so that each cell is encoded to become a heart cell, a lung cell, a brain cell, or any other type of cell. And within each different organ, for example, an eye, the conjunctiva of the eye is encoded to be transparent, and the rods and the cones at the back of the eye are encoded to actually change light energy in the form of photons into electrical energy, which is sent up the optic nerve to your visual cortex. Now, what in this book, Origin of Species, Charles Darwin proposed is that gene mutation occurs. It's just something that happens and produces new forms of species. Well, let me tell you, that's rubbish. I'm very, very strong on this. It is absolute rubbish, that. Let's look at our individual cells. Now, in our cells, there is an error-correcting mechanism for incorrect coding on our DNA or the messenger RNA. You see, we've got our DNA, the code, in the center of a mitochondria, but in order to get that code to the periphery of the mitochondria, we have to have messenger RNA to send it to the periphery of the cell to make the amino acids. Now, DNA is a very, very complicated code. And actually, there's an awful lot of errors in encoding DNA. It's not something you would think from reading Charles Darwin books that, his book, that changes or mutation of DNA happens very occasionally. Actually, nothing could be further than the truth. It happens all the time. Every day in our human body, in my human body, and in your human body, there are literally millions of errors in our DNA, and they are all corrected by the self-correcting code which God has put into all of our cells. As I said, if you were to read Charles Darwin's book, Origin of Species, you would definitely get the impression that a mutation of DNA happens every, I don't know, a few hundred years or something, and you get a new species, and then by adaptation, natural selection, and survival of the fittest, the new species either is better adapted or worse adapted, and then survives or doesn't survive, and that's how Charles Darwin says new species are actually formed. Well, I'm telling you, he's completely wrong, because actually, now with the benefit of electron microscopy, we know that DNA actually produces errors all the time, literally millions of times every single day. Errors of the DNA encoding happen all the time, and they're all corrected. Gene mutations are unfortunately quite common, but all medical doctors are very familiar with them. And so would anybody else. If you take the trouble to look it up on the internet, you'll find very quickly about gene mutation. And one thing you'll find is that they always cause illness or death. Now, there are three common ways that DNA is damaged. Let's look at image 191. That's an image of radiation, usually by nuclear energy. Now, you'll be familiar with nuclear bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 at the end of World War II. And lots of people's DNA was damaged by exposure to nuclear radiation, and they developed cancer and later died if they weren't killed immediately at the explosion. Equally, you're probably familiar with Chernobyl, the nuclear power station in Russia, which is still causing cancer in areas immediately around Chernobyl. More recently, you'll be probably familiar or have heard of the nuclear explosion in Japan. And the nuclear radiation from that explosion is now causing radiation in the Pacific Ocean and is threatening to cause a lot of gene mutation in all the fish in the Pacific Ocean and all the seabirds as well, and they're all dying. They're not getting better, they're dying. So if this gene mutation idea of Charles Darwin was right, then the Pacific Ocean would be full of new types of fish caused by gene mutation. It's not causing new types of fish, it's causing a lot of dead fish and a lot of worry too. Let's move on to the next slide. Slide 132, chemicals can cause gene mutation, damage the DNA. You may remember, sometime in the 70s or 80s, I forget exactly when, but there was a drug called Thalidomide given to pregnant mothers to stop them feeling sick. Sadly, they discovered that on occasions this drug caused damage to the DNA, and you got children born with deformed or absent limbs. This is because of gene mutation. Again, we have an example here that thalidomide did cause gene mutation, but it didn't cause better children. It caused, sadly, it caused children who had poorly developed limbs. Thirdly, let's look at the last image, this image 193, which is an image of particular viruses. Now, disease, of course, can be caused by bacteria or viruses, all different types of pathogens, and they can actually damage the DNA as well. But the thing is that they do not cause better humans, they cause worse humans. They cause damaged humans and dead humans. Now, let's talk about disease. Disease caused by radiation, caused by chemicals, and caused by sickness. In other words, by bacteria or viruses or fungi or whatever. There are various diseases which we know are caused by damage to the DNA, and I'll give you some examples. You've probably heard of Down syndrome. Well, Down syndrome is basically caused by damage to the DNA. Spina bifida, you've probably heard of spina bifida. Again, that is caused by damage to the DNA. Anencephaly is a Latin word. It means a baby born without a head. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often, but that is definitely caused by a gene damage to the DNA. There are lots of other fetal abnormalities. I'm not going to show you any pictures of these horrible diseases because they're not nice. I would like to show some of these evolutionists what really happens when you damage DNA and cause gene mutation. You do not get different species. You get very nasty illnesses and death. So how he can possibly propose that evolution is caused by gene mutation when we know, without any shadow of doubt, that gene mutation causes cancer and death and very, really nasty diseases, is completely beyond me. It's complete and absolute rubbish. We know for a fact that there's an increase of cancer following gene mutation and exposure to radioactive nuclear radiation around Chernobyl and around Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There weren't any super kids born around Hiroshima, Nagasaki and Chernobyl. There were damaged children with cancer or damaged with cell abnormalities of different types. There's also a great increase of cancer following these various explosions. So let's look at the next slide, which is 194, talking about gene mutation. You see, this is the backbone of evolution. And I'm just telling you, I look you straight in the eye and say, gene mutation does not cause a super species or a different species. It causes death, illness, sickness, and very nasty diseases. It's a very, very nasty thing. The doctors, clever doctors all over the world, are trying to prevent gene mutation. They don't want gene mutation to occur because they know it causes illness and death. So I think now that we know that gene mutation does not cause evolution but causes illness and death, then we should stop talking about evolution as fact and banish evolution to the myth of fairy stories, which is where it comes from. So this gene mutation, as proposed by Charles Darwin, does not lead to the development of new gene pool. It doesn't lead to new species. It doesn't lead to a new pool of genetic information from which a new species can arise. And basically, the main hypothesis on which evolution is founded is flawed. It's incorrect. It's wrong. It's not scientifically proven. It's rubbish. And I do wish people would do a bit of research and find these things out for themselves. Gene mutations cause death or disease. Abnormal mutations of genes do not cause different species. They cause death of the species affected by the gene mutation. There isn't a single example in all the medical literature that I've ever studied where a gene mutation has caused an improved human. All literature that I've ever seen on gene mutation has caused nasty disease, cancer, and death. And that is the bottom line. It's absolute rubbish. So let's turn back to this natural selection idea, image 195. Remember going back to the moths we were talking about in the last program, Charles Darwin proposed that gene mutation caused the melanic moths, the black moths, to produce black wings, which on the left, in the Industrial Revolution, gave them protection against the birds because they were on a black background. But now, because we've got over the Industrial Revolution, the black moths are exposed to the birds, and now the birds are eating the black moths now rather than the white moths in the Industrial Revolution. The point is that it was proposed that gene mutation was the reason why the black moths developed the black wings. Rubbish. Basically, moths have a gene pool for white wings and black wings in the same way as dogs have a gene pool for long legs and short legs, and long hair and short hair and other features as well. So do ponies, so do horses and penguins and all sorts of other things. It's got nothing whatever to do with gene mutation. So natural selection, which is the mechanism for producing these new so-called mutant forms, this idea of natural selection doesn't lead to macroevolution or changing of one species to another. Natural selection provides no new genetic information from which a new species can evolve. Natural selection actually preserves the existing species rather than encouraging the evolution of a mutant form, since the mutant form is always less well adapted for life because they are sick, they're ill, they've got nasty diseases, they're malformed, they're not at all adapted to the life of a parent species who hasn't got these gene mutations. So all this talk about gene mutation causing evolution is rubbish. It's garbage, and it should be put in the rubbish dump because it's absolute rubbish. So in the above example of a mutant form of moth, the moth would almost certainly be diseased or malformed if it was actually caused by a gene mutation. But it's not. We get black moths and white moths, and we get black horses and white horses and brown horses and all the rest. It's all to do with the gene pool, which is what God put there in the first place. Actual science, which is really looking at something in detail and then examining it in the laboratory, does not prove or even support evolution in any way or form. Evolution was never actually seen by Charles Darwin. It was postulated that it happened very slowly. And actually, this isn't right, because if evolution happened very slowly, you should be seeing lots of animals in your neighborhood changing into other animals, but you're not. So, Charles, very simply, if evolution happens very slowly, you should see dogs changing into cats and birds and all the rest of it, but you're not. Charles Darwin can't have it both ways, you see. He said it happens very slowly, and that explains why we can't see them. Well, actually, when you think it through logically, if evolution happens very slowly, you should be able to see lots of species changing into other species, but you don't. So the whole evolution theory is completely unscientific and flawed. I'm just going to give you a few quotes from some prominent scientists. You may think that scientists all believe in evolution. Well, they jolly well don't. Here's the first one, slide 196. This is Sir Fred Hoyle, a famous UK astronomer, and this is what he wrote. I'll just read it out to you, what he actually wrote. A super intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as with chemistry and biology. The likelihood of the formation of life from inanimate matter is 1 to a number of 10 with 40,000 noughts after it. It's enough to bury Darwin and the whole theory of evolution. There was no primeval soup neither on this planet nor any other planet, and if the beginnings of life were not random, they must therefore have been the product of a purposeful intelligence. That was published in Nature magazine, volume 294 in 1981. Let's move on to the next well-known scientist, image 197. That's Sir Francis Crick, who discovered DNA. This is what he actually wrote. He received the Nobel Prize in biology after discovering DNA. An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle, so many are the conditions which would have to be satisfied to get it going. That was published in Life Itself, Its Origin and Nature in London in 1982. Let's move on to the next well-known scientist, image 198, Sir James Jeans. He's a British physicist who lived in 1930, this is what he wrote. Nature seems very conversant with the rules of pure mathematics. In the same way, a scientific study of the action of the universe has suggested a conclusion which may be summed up in the statement that the universe appears to have been designed by a pure mathematician. The universe can best be pictured, although still very imperfectly and inadequately, as if consisting of pure thought. If the universe is a universe of thought, then its creation must have been the act of thought. Indeed, the finiteness of space compels us to think of the Creator as working outside time and space, which are part of his creation, just as an artist is outside his canvas. That was published in his book, The Mysterious Universe. Let's move on to the next well-known scientist. Image 199, Sir Robert Jastrow, a NASA astronomer. This is what he wrote. Now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply in a definite moment of time, in a flash of light and energy. He wrote that in his book, God and the Astronomers. In the next picture, image 200, George Greenstein, this is what he wrote. As we survey all the evidence, the thought instantly arises that some supernatural agency, or rather agency, must have been involved. It is possible that suddenly, without intending to, we have stumbled upon the existence of a supreme being. Was it God who stepped in and so providentially crafted the cosmos for our benefit? Next one is Arno Penzias, image 201. He's a famous physicist and Nobel laureate, and this is what he wrote. Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with a very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. The last scientist I want to bring to your attention is image 202, Robert Shapiro. And this is what he wrote. The improbability involved in generating even one bacterium is so large that it reduces all considerations of time and space to nothingness. Given such odds, the time until the black holes evaporated and the space to the ends of the universe would make no difference at all. If we were to wait, we'd be truly waiting for a miracle. So there we have it. We have very, very well-known, highly respectable scientists who are all saying that they're not all Christians, all of these, but they're just saying that it couldn't have happened by chance. What they're all saying is that there must have been a supreme intelligence behind the creation of the universe and life itself. I do hope you're enjoying these programs. This is a very intense course on evolution to show that evolution is a fraud, evolution is impossible, and it should be taken off the curriculum. If they want to show it, they should show it alongside creation. Join me again soon. Please write info@revelationtv.com. We're carrying on evolution. It's a big subject and a very, very important one. Thanks for joining us. God bless you, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye now.